Alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen wa salatu wa salamu ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallim. All thanks and adoration belong to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the uncreated creator, the first before every unit and the last after every number. I bear witness that He is the uncreated creator who has sent the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with his divine message to the entire mankind. We thank him for giving us yet another opportunity to converge on this occasion of the Nigeria independence anniversary. It's indeed a great pleasure to have with us our fathers, and I would like to start by acknowledging their presence. I'd like to recognize the President of Nigeria, Ambassador to Malaysia, um, His Excellency Alhaji Nuruddin Mohammed, and also our Director, Tansri Emeritus Professor Zulkifli Abdulrazak, the Honorable Rector of the International Islamic University. Do pardon me that I'm joining online. I wouldn't know who and who, um, um, you know, important personalities. Everyone is important, but our special guests that are there. So do allow me to stand on existing protocol. And I wish to also recognize the presence of my other discussants in this particular event, Dr. Rashida, Dr. Sadiq, Dr. Awal, and all other brothers and sisters who are there present. Again, gratitude to the NISCOM executive for giving me this opportunity to have this presentation online. I sincerely apologize for not being able to join you physically. The event is, holding at the same time with another commitment, prior commitment, which I've given my consent to earlier. Today's topic is on sustainable development in Nigeria, the role of the diaspora. And what I've done is to just break this topic into a few chunks so that my brief discussion can have some guide. I've divided it into the question of what, um, where, by who, when, and how. And what I mean by this is that the topic itself is sustainable development in Nigeria. So it means the what would be the sustainable development and the where would be Nigeria. It says the role of the diaspora, then it means the who, of course, would be the diaspora. So I'll just discuss along this line briefly. Alhamdulillah, it's the 60th anniversary of Nigeria, and we have every reason to thank Allah. Like he says in Surah Al-Rahman, which among his blessings can we deny? There are so many of them that we cannot even count. But then it's also important that even within his infinite mercy and blessings, we take stock. So we know how to give thanks to him and perhaps know how to appreciate his bounties upon us. So sustainable development is a concept that has a considerable diversity behind it because a lot of people have looked at it from various perspectives, and it is one of the agenda that has attracted enormous attention from world leaders, as it were. And in a layman's language, we would say sustainable development is that type of development in which the needs of the present time is met without necessarily compromising on the ability of the future generations to meet their own needs as at and when the need arises. So in other words, it means not using future resources for present needs, so that we factor in the fact that even in Allah's bounties that He has made resources very, very vast and unlimited in some sense. Economists do take cognizance of the fact that for the sake of our own appreciation and as a reflection of hard work, that resources are indeed scarce. They have to be looked for, and they are depletable. So to this extent, we have to bear in mind the fact that sustainable development is just about not enjoying ourselves absolutely at the expense of those who would need such kind of resources later on in life. Now, if we move further from there, we would say that most countries have keyed in into this particular agenda. And like I said, there is now the Sustainable Development Goals. There are actually 17 of them, integrated goals. Of course, the first one is eradication of global poverty. And like we'll see later on, we realize that these 17 goals actually revolve or rotate around, the pivot of poverty eradication goal, which is the number one. Um, Most countries have keyed into this agenda, and they have the plan of achieving these 17 goals by the year 2030. The basic objectives are basically to eradicate poverty, to ensure the planet is protected in terms of avoiding environmental degradation, and then to ensure that people live in peace and enjoy shared prosperity. And regardless of faith, regardless of um, culture, regardless of political affiliation, preference, or disposition, would see that these goals of ending poverty, these goals of ensuring shared prosperity, of promoting peace, and perhaps of protecting lives as well as the planet are lofty goals, and they should be achieved, as much as possible. Now, one good thing again, I mean, in UIA, is a as Garden of Virtues and Knowledge. It's a kind of blended knowledge that we are provided with there. So when we look at things from the conventional, we also balance it, from the revelation. That's why we always say revelation, and reason go together, as must have been sung during the IIUM anthem, which of course I'm sure must have been played prior to me joining this program. Now, from a Marxist point of view, therefore, these goals are also very, lofty, because the Marxist um, have essentially three forms. Looking at the daruriya, that is the necessities, things that when they are not there, there is a threat to the whole essence of life itself. And then there is the ajiyat, that is the complementaries, as well as the tahsiniyat, those things that are luxury. And it will reflect the social class that people are. Why some people are very much concerned about ensuring that they have the basic minimum in life, of the basic things of life. Others, would have attained a little bit higher status, and they are just operating at the complementary level, while some enjoy some level of luxury. But the most important thing is that the objective of the Sharia is to remove hardship, to protect the public interest, and as much as possible promote distributive justice. So in this case, the essentials is that the Sharia intends to protect the deen, intends to protect the life, intends to protect the intellect, wealth, as well as the progeny. So, from a Sharia point of view, we also see that there is this perception of looking at sustainability, especially when you look at the protection of progeny, to say that there are generations that would still come after by Allah's will, that would also need resources that are available to the present generation, as the case may be. So, along this line, even from a development finance perspective, we talk about the concept of sustainable livelihood assets. And these assets are such that, as defined by the Department for International Development, refers to those assets you need to ensure you have the capability and the capacity, to maintain a living standard, and perhaps to recover from economic shock and stress. Because, as it were, there will be times that there will be issues, and there will be times that things will be very, very okay, but there will also be trials. So the sustainable livelihood assets are not only those things that provide you with the capability and capacity, to be the best you can, but those things that can also help you recover in the event of stress and shocks, as the case may be. COVID itself is a shock. People have lost job, production have stopped, and things like that. These livelihood assets, where they are there, are things that will bring people out. And of course, there will be trials, like I said. Allah also has said in Quran chapter 2, verse 214, there will be trials with poverty, there will be trials with ailment, and so on and so forth. So, these livelihood assets are things that we expect to be able to build people out. So why do we discuss about all this in the context of Nigeria? It's very simple. Nigeria is located in West Africa, in the heart of Africa, and arguably the biggest economy in Africa, the largest population, largest concentration of African people of African descent. I also don't like to use the word black people, because there is no black, there is no white. We are all people. We can only talk of where we have descended. Of course, that is open to debate anyway. And Nigeria is endowed with requisite resources to achieve, its rightful status among Committee of Nations, because it is blessed with vast arable land for agriculture, tropical savanna, commercial deposit of precious metals, abundance of agricultural and industrial cash crops, colossal deposit of petroleum resources, and very, very talented human resources, as it were. But as it were, some statistics have said that it is the poverty capital of the world, which I also, do not subscribe to easily, because statistics, should not be interpreted in absolute terms. It should also be in relative terms. But that's again open to debate. The most important thing is that Nigeria's economic resources is such that should not have put it in the situation where it has found itself. So it is important we talk about sustainable development from the point of view of Nigeria, because one of the sustainable development goals, in fact the first one for that matter, which is poverty, is arguably a social menace confronting Nigeria today. And it's very much reflected in the fact that people lack material well-being, they suffer some form of psychological or physical insecurity, they have social isolation, they have identity exclusion, psychological distress, lack of freedom of choice and action, unpredictability or inability to have long-term planning, because they live on the margin of physical survival, live by the day as the case may be, and then as a result there is low self-esteem and then self-confidence. People engage in what we call 4D types of jobs, dangerous jobs, difficult jobs, deadly jobs, and of course dirty jobs. And often than not, you see people who lack the 4H. In other words, they are not hired, they are not housed, they are not happy, and they are not healthy. So, but when we look at all this, it's not a peculiar phenomenon. It's just because the world itself, has not been fair to itself, if I may put it that way. And poverty, therefore, is a very serious issue. The late um, UN President Kofi Annan once referred to it as, you know, a serious threat to world peace. That poverty is even more dangerous than terrorism and religious fundamentalism. It is more dangerous than ethnic hatred or political rivalries or any form of other forces that often um, promote violence and war. And why did he say that? It's because poverty leads to hopelessness. When somebody is poor, his opportunity cost may almost be zero. He's already on the ground. He's not scared of falling, and he will do whatever he needs to do, albeit right or wrong, to ensure that he reflects his desperation, and he would have no reason to refrain from violence, because any act that he does, no matter how small, as long as it will improve his chance of bettering his condition, then he will see it from a rational point of view, even though if the consequences may be very, very dire. So it also promotes economic refugees. People call it economic asylum, where brain drain, will be the order of the day. And Nigeria has had its own fair share of this. There was a statistics I was listening to the other time that Nigerians are the most qualified persons in the in the US, and perhaps also the most educated community of immigrants in the US also. And I'm sure it's pretty much like that in most countries. And Malaysia is also, not an exception, because before you find somebody coming to Malaysia, of course, there may be a few people here and there whose motives may not be clear, but often than not, I want to assume, and maybe our father is here from the embassy, maybe statistics would show that often than not, most people from Nigeria who come to Malaysia will be those who seek to pursue their academic or career prospects here in Malaysia. So in this case, it means therefore that Nigeria as a nation is worthy of discussing in this kind of event that we have found ourselves. Let's have a quick look at the socio-economic realities in Nigeria. Now, it presents a huge paradox that notwithstanding its enormous resource endowment, that most Nigerians still suffer in the midst of plenty, and the systemic failure prevalent in virtually all aspects of its national life is well captured by Abati in 2008. Ruben Abati used to be a columnist with The Guardian, and he later became the spokesperson for President Goodluck Jonathan. And he had captured this prior to joining the government anyway, that Nigeria is deep rooted in one spot, gyrating on its axis where nothing absolutely appears working. This was as far back as 2008, and nothing much has changed, if you ask me, in that regard. Not necessarily because it's not changing, but maybe the rate of change, is not keeping up with the expectation, and as a result, that effort is being subsumed by the expectation gap that keeps widening by the day. Now we have statistics from government pronouncements, these feel good statistics as I like to call them, and they also reflect improvements. Just a few days ago, we have had the president, with a speech reeling out the achievements of this present administration. And the truth is that they cannot be denied because we can see most of them. But the point again that Nigerians would make is the fact that, like I said earlier, the expectation gap is getting wider and wider by the day. So, notwithstanding, most Nigerians still feel a bit dissatisfied, even with the status quo. Um, since independence from the British in 1960, Nigeria arguably has witnessed one of the longest military intervention in Africa, and then following that unpopular annulment of the June 12, 1993 election, which is considered to be the freest and fairest in the history of election in Nigeria. People thought that we had learned our lessons, and people were tired, and returning to civil rule in 1999 will come with huge expectations. And of course, the right to do so is not far-fetched, because if we looked at the fact that what happened between that time and the eventual fate of the main actors, in that particular circumstance also would make Nigerians to expect that, okay, now we have learned our lessons and we are ready to move on. And that there will be another opportunity to retrace our steps. Now, immediately the democratically elected government came in 1999. One of the first things they did was to hold, a program in the Nigeria. I've forgotten now this institute at Kuru in Plateau State, where they, Nigerian Strategic Studies, if I'm not mistaken. And then one of the things that the government had said, which was very, very okay, which gave people hope, was the fact that given our return to democracy, there is a need for Nigeria to, find its level again. And the government made a declaration that they had that they intend to build a truly African democratic country that is politically united, integrated and stable, economically prosperous, socially organized, with equal opportunities for all and responsibility from all, to become the catalyst of Africa Renaissance and making adequate and all-embracing contributions, sub-regionally, regionally, as well as globally. And I want to say with every sense of sincerity that this declaration is not an exaggeration by Nigerian standard, given what Allah had endowed it with. So we expected that this transition would have been the catalyst to bringing about the positive transformation in the lives of Nigeria, but the reverse, or the converse is true. And of course there is political leadership issue, but again we cannot also absorb the kind of followership, because we keep electing our leaders, and our leaders at times may also be a reflection of the kind of followers that we are. So, and of course, there has been series of corruption allegations here and there, and I also like to say that we are easily pointed out as being a very corrupt nation. But again, it takes two to tango. The countries where these loot are taken to should also reflect some moral standard by either releasing the stolen funds that have been proven to have been stolen earlier, or prevent new stolen money from being stored or saved in their country. We know of past Nigerian government officials who have been found to have slashed some money in foreign accounts here and there. So such situations have been the bane of Nigeria, and it has not made it to grow to achieve its potentials, as it were. Consequently, the poor people have to bear the incidents. And what this means is that poor households are often likely to be excluded from public services, which require grease payments as their burden of corruption. Uh, well, we don't want to call it bribe. Maybe they say mobilization fee to make it look very, very nice at times. But the point we're trying to make here is that things should work. People should be able to access what they need, not necessarily until they have to, cough out certain amount of money that they don't even have in the first instance. If service delivery is such that if you don't, make things happen, then things will not happen. In fact, somebody would say jokingly that even if you want to die and you want your corpse to be given the right kind of treatment, you also have to settle even before you die, and things like that. So the poor therefore are severely disadvantaged, as they lack the resources to purchase private services, but then the government services alternative are not just available to them. So the situation today has not changed too much for the better, and it in fact presents a huge paradox of the Kuru declaration that I had quoted earlier. So today, not only that Nigeria is politically disintegrated, it is socially dislocated and economically unstable. And the expected dividend of democracy promised, when we return back to democratic rule in 1999, has not trickled down. And economic prosperity expected is also not seen as much as desired. Rather, there is exclusion from political, social, economic, cultural, and social activities of the society. And this has exacerbated what we refer to as dynastic or persistent poverty, or we call intergenerational transmission of poverty and inequality. So in such situation, it is next to impossible that Nigeria will be able to achieve, its desired status among the committee of nations. In terms of our political economy, quickly, um, it is basically tried to say that Nigeria, of course, has imbibed democratic principle and has returned to democratic rule, civil rule or evil rule, as some people like to say it jokingly, in 1999. And even the America, from where we say we have copied this democratic system of government from, the 32nd president, Franklin Roosevelt, did mention a very nice quote which I always like to read all the time, that the pace of America's progress is not whether we had more to the abundance of those who have much. It is whether we provide enough to those who have little. So, if that is the essence, the backbone of democracy, it means perhaps we are practicing another type of democracy, which is not the ideal one. So, here, the ideals of democratic governance, therefore, are hinged on civic participation and inclusion across economic, social, and as well as political divides, and are incontrovertibly desirable even from the theologically communitarian philosophy of Islam, that this should be there. So Islam promotes law and order, the rule of law, protection of human rights, property rights, regardless of socioeconomic status or political lineage or perhaps cultural affiliation, and it accepts the majority rule. It's theologically communitarian. Islam is about the community, and everyone should be carried along. So this, therefore, should be what we should be finding in our society, because if we have this, it will not only promote political stability, it would ensure economic prosperity, it will build social civility. And in that case, we'll see that the benefit of democracy will start to trickle down and everybody would enjoy. But unlike what we have today, where we have more of political openings through democracy, but economic closure through the fact that there is what we call free market and people are left behind. So, notwithstanding Nigeria's potentials, therefore, um, there is still so much that we can achieve, and as much as possible, if we can take care of the first sustainable development goals, then we would be very very much in the good trajectory to achieving our desired status as a nation. So Nigeria, therefore, in terms of its political economy, I would say that what we would see is that there is variability in the vulnerability of the poor. You understand what I'm saying? And the severity of the intensity of their poverty is such that can only be imagined, because it's more or less like they're in a poverty trap. So this trend, therefore, has assumed what I call intergenerational transmission, where children of the poor inherit poverty while the children of the rich inherit property. And this rather pitiable state of the nation has not abated and may be linked to systemic and governance failure. Obviously, there is a need to look at rejigging the various reforms in Nigeria to ensuring that people get as much as they desire from the political experience that we have enjoyed. So in the next 2 minutes, I just like to say, so who are those that will do this? Nigerians, you and I, whether we are in the diaspora or we're in Nigeria, we have to do this. You remember years ago, we used to have this favorite Nigerian musician, Sonny Okosun, which was asking, which way Nigeria, which way Nigeria, and this was years back. The questions will still be as pertinent, as they were asked then, today. And I also remember in 1985 or there, 1985, yeah, we just getting into secondary school, and Nigeria was celebrating its 25th anniversary then. And then one of the things we were taught in school then was to, sing the Nigerian song, Nigeria is 25. The odds we did survive. Arise, salute the nation. Come join the celebration. People united will never fall. The sun will shine and the rain will fall on our land, vast Almighty, richly blessed by the Almighty. Like the beast in the hive, we work so hard to make Nigeria grow, but not without the use of the hoe. So, I mean, very nice song. We used to sing, in the morning congregation, and we imbibe that spirit and things that are moving on. But I would say, well, 25, 35 years down the lane, we're still where we are, gyrating, deep rooted, on a fixed spot and gyrating on our axis, as Abati had earlier painted it. So, how do we move forward? It pretty much depends on where we are going. In Allies in Wonderland, you recall the conversation between Allies and the cat, Cheshire Cat, and Allies was asking when she had missed her way, would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? Just like Sonny Okosun was asking which way Nigeria. And the Cheshire Cat did answer, that depends a good ideal on where you want to get to. Then Alice was like, I just don't much care anyway. I just want to get her from here. And the Cheshire Cat says, then it doesn't matter, you know, which way you go because you just want to go. If you don't know where you are going, it doesn't matter which way you take. You'll just be right. So if we want to know where we are going, then we should know where to head. So by the virtue of this program's theme, I want to assume that we want to head towards the road of sustainable development. And I'll say how we get there is through sustainable livelihood assets. And I'll just mention them in brief because of time. And the first is human capital, ensuring that we have the right set of skills, knowledge, capacity at work, good health, and altogether this would enable different people to pursue different livelihood strategies and achieve their livelihood outcomes. And this will not only be at the household level, it will be at the collective level. So for those of us in diaspora to have taken that long journey to embark on this sojourn to either enhancing our academic career or perhaps polishing or refining our professional career, it builds on us to make it count. Our thesis should not only end up in the shelf, it should be something that is applicable. We should not only think about solving a problem and writing a thesis to get our degree. We should look for problems on the ground. And that is one of the things that will make UIA to be that university, global university that it is really is, because problems that will be solved in various parts of the world will be emanating from here. And we have very good examples of people who are already doing that. But again, let's see how things work out. Now, I have a friend called Akim Zubair, and one of the things he has done from his thesis, which he did in Canada, he had been able to commence a project called the 1 Million Teachers Project. You can, Google this and find how much they are doing. And the aim is to ensure that at least 1 million teachers will be trained in Nigeria, because that is the outcome of his thesis. It's already working the talk. Then there is financial capital. People need finance. If there is no fund, then there is so much you can do. There is financial exclusion. And this financial exclusion can either be voluntary or involuntary. It may be voluntary because people don't want to engage in riba, because they are not aware, because they don't have you know enough they have debt phobia, they don't trust in the system and things like that. So our thesis should be able to do such, and this is one of the areas which I worked on, which I've also experimented, and I think it works. We cannot wait for the government all the time. At my informal level, I've had a small scheme where people are empowered. They would send message, you give them money, they squander, they give them money, they squander. But I've tried to make it formal, whereby you prepare some forms and give some training to them and let them understand that these funds was obtained from some source. You are standing guarantee for them. They pay back. I'm surprised they pay back, and some of them are now on their feet. Another good example will be our dear brother Hafiz Bello. I'm sure maybe he's in the audience with you there, with his lead finance project, which they are also doing very, very fine in Nigeria to ensuring that people have access to finance. The other one is physical capital. We should not also squander all our funds or our experience that we garner in Malaysia or elsewhere on just on what I call luxuries, or things that are not going to bring that kind of desired outcome that we want. So physical capital provide support to meet the basic needs. We expect the government to provide basic infrastructures, portable water, motorable roads, affordable transportation systems, sanitation, and so on and so forth. But we also can engage, in this physical capital generation to ensure that our assets are productive. We, put money into things that can bring about people engaging in activities that would perhaps help to reduce the poverty situation in Nigeria or the unemployment situation. The natural capital is refers to the environment, how we ensure that the environment as much as possible is protected. So what are the things that we are looking at? What are the experience we have seen? What has our thesis shown that we can do? Another very good friend who has graduated from here from engineering is engaged in this waste disposal, activity. And he has also gone to Australia to also develop further on this particular knowledge, and is looking into this possibility, of waste, collection and recycling, so to ensure that things are done. And of course, again, our dear brother Afis, please permit me to mention your name again, is also doing well in terms of the solar energy or alternative power generation scheme that is putting in place in Nigeria, and the use, of course, of the telecommunication and technology. Now, the last but one is the social capital. We need ourselves. And as social human beings, that sense of mutual trust, responsibility, reciprocity, and cooperation that exists amongst the members of a social network is very important. We put ourselves together from here so that when we go home, we also can cope. Nigerian system will subsume you as an individual, but when we go as a collective, when we see ourselves as a collective, we behave well here, and we even behave better when we go back home, and we'll be able to help to achieve that. So here is basically saying that networking is very, very important, and to connect with people back home as well as those that are here. And may Allah have his blessings on the noble soul of Professor Muibi Sulaiman, their father, who would always, at the slightest opportunity, remind us of the need for us to have networking in place. The last one I want to mention is psychological capital, and this is just, the last man's resort to solving this issue. When everything else has failed, then of course we have hope. One thing that Nigerians have is this sense of hope, this sense of resilience, that they demonstrate, and it has helped them to survive financial shock or stress. So what I want to say is that whether we are outside or we're in Nigeria, we should also have this psychological capital, this hope, this resilience that Nigeria may not be where we want it to be, but it's already on the trajectory. And with you and I, doing our bits, inshallah, it would be where it is expected to be, or even perhaps surpass that. And I want to assume that, inshallah, most of these things I've spoken to will be one of some of the highlights of the other presenters that they will be able to offer further insights into. So thanks so much for this opportunity, and may Allah in His Rahmah give us the opportunity to witness more independent anniversary of Nigeria. And as we, mark many more Independence Day celebration, we have things to also show for it that Nigeria is actually growing, and is growing, in the right direction. Subhana rabbika rabbil izzati amma yasifun. Wassalamun ala al-mursalin. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.